Now think about what that means. What happened? What did John need to see? Why do we have this picture of Jesus walking around like that? Because most people didn't see him after the resurrection. Only, the 12 apostles, well, the 11 apostles that were alive, and then, later they picked the 12th, and then God picked one, and it was Paul, but that's not what I'm on. And then he visited 500 other people, but the vast majority didn't see Christ after the resurrection. So they had this past view of him, and they had a great memory. But what happened to the Christ of the Gospels when he walked out the empty tomb and left behind the burial garments? Well, for a minute, think about what they did know, what they knew about Christ. Here's Christ's whole ministry. Wherever Jesus went, his presence made sure that death fled, disease faded, despair melted. Broken bodies that came into contact with Jesus. That's why everyone was hauling, their grandfather on a stretcher or their aunt and putting him in front of Jesus, hoping he'd walk by. Because Jesus, whenever he was around, dispelled. Ruined lives were repaired, sightless eyes restored, empty ears filled with sound, missing fingers for those that had leprosy, and hungering lives were satisfied. Now think of that. Everywhere Jesus went, wherever he was, every time he was there, whenever you could find Jesus, they were always looking for him during his ministry, the crowds. When you could find him, death, disease, and despair were no more. But look at this. Jesus only did that localized. You know what that meant? He was in one place at a time. And so there was this whole network of people saying, we sighted him over there. Crowds would run to find him over there. And they would drag all these sick people. But Jesus only did it in just one place at a time. So either they were saying, like Mary and Martha, come help Lazarus, we need you here. Or, Jairus' daughter, they run to him and say, my daughter is dying, come. But he could only do it in one place at a time. But real quickly, in a very short time, people found something out. After the empty tomb, the unlimited power of Christ was now available everywhere. Two are walking on the Emmaus Road, and Jesus shows up. And the disciples simultaneously were in this room, the doors locked, scared to death. Jesus shows up. What they found is something had changed. Jesus was now available everywhere, anywhere, all the time. That's what Revelation was sent to show. He's now simultaneously around all the churches. That's what the lampstand was saying. He's watching all of us equally, constantly. Now, wait a minute. Let's back up. Do you remember what Jesus' greatest miracle was? There are 37 recorded miracles in the Gospels in the 89 chapters. What was the greatest one? Was it healing the blind? No, because after 20, 30, 40 years, their eyes started getting cataracts again. How about healing the lame? Well, if you've watched older people, pretty soon their hips get out and their knees go out and they're kind of dragging along. They get old. Everything Jesus did in all of his miracles wore out. The wine ran out. He didn't make endless wine. The sight would dim. The joints would stop. Everything, except for one miracle. One miracle. The greatest miracle is also our greatest need. It isn't happiness, which your culture and the Instagram world is saying, if you just get this look, you can be happy. No. The greatest need we have is forgiveness. And that's the miracle Jesus still does, and it never wears out. Well, back to this whole class. Are you willing to let Jesus change you? That this whole thing, you want to be useful. We're supposed to, no matter what we do, and I ask all of you, what are you going to do? And I just met someone this morning, they're going to be in, I think, healthcare, and they're going to be helping people, and others of you I met someone that's going to be in production and tech and media and all these different things, and missionaries and all kinds of stuff. But it doesn't matter what we do to earn an income. Our reason we were left here was to share Christ's greatest miracle. And John and the early church had to be reminded that no matter what was going on in their life, no matter who was hunting them, no matter how hard it was, no matter how sore they were, how alone they were, one thing they're supposed to do. They're supposed to share Christ's greatest miracle. And that's what we're supposed to do. And then watch him change their life. So real quickly, I've got enough time. I want to tell you about my friend, Daniel. Okay, I got my doctorate at Dallas Theological Seminary, and I was writing my dissertation. My dissertation, by the way, my doctorate is in Revelation. Can you believe that? They let me do my doctorate on explaining Revelation. I call it explanatory preaching, explaining, the historic and geographic and linguistic and every scriptural context. And so I was writing my dissertation, but that was on the side. I was still a full-time pastor. And so I was a full-time pastor, and if you know anything about being a pastor, that means that everybody that walks in the church door that has a need, you talk to them. And so I learned really quickly that the only way I would get my dissertation done is to take my lunch hour off campus, away from the church. And so I would check out and say, I'm going to lunch, and I would zip over to this place about a half hour away. It was a Starbucks. And I wouldn't eat, I would work on my dissertation, and I would edit it. It was the busiest Starbucks in our town of 1 million, and it was the busiest one. Every time I got there, I would edit in line because there would be 20 people ahead of me. I mean, they even had turns, those rope things where you would go like this to get up to order. And so I would order, and then I would stand at the end. And what I noticed is every time at the end, the barista would take my drink. He'd say, venti latte for John. And have you ever seen them do that? They go and they look at you for just one, like a millisecond, because they're rushing off to the next one. They're sliding it up. I started looking at him in that millisecond, and I noticed his eyes, because briefly his eyes would connect for 1/10 of a second with mine before he rushed off. His eyes were orange. Now, those of you in the medical field, do you know what that means? His liver was failing. It's called bilirubin, is the unfiltered out junk in your blood that when your liver's failing, it's a big filter system. It's like taking all the poisons out, and your liver doesn't do it, and it stays in your blood, and it starts building up in visible areas. And one of them, when you have hyperbilirubinemia, your eyes turn orange. The whites of your eyes darken and get orange. I started noticing Mr. Orange Eyes. So then I looked at his name tag. And at church, I stopped at the track rack, pulled out my wallet, took a track, prayed over it, folded it in half, and said, Lord, I'd like to share the gospel with Daniel. But there are 20 people in line. He is frantically making drinks. And I know he won't listen if there's 20 drinks waiting with those little stickers on them. So I said, I will know it's time to share the gospel with Daniel if nobody's behind me in line. Boy, that was convenient, right? It was the busiest Starbucks in a city of 1 million. I didn't think any more about it. Track was in my pocket, and I was walking with all my gear, and I got behind the 20 people in line, and I was walking up, and I ordered my drink. There was no one behind me. I'd never been in that Starbucks before with no one behind me. I couldn't wait. And Daniel finished my drink, and I bet he couldn't believe it either. He didn't have any more cups to do. So he slowly went, venti vanilla latte for John. And I looked at him, I said, hi, Daniel. Boy, it shocked him. Did you know people forget they wear those little name tags? I said, Daniel, I've got something, and I was pulling the track out of my wallet. And guess what? People started coming through the door. I could see them coming toward the cash register. I knew I had like 30 seconds, 45. I said, Daniel, this is a gospel tract. This is the plan of salvation. Daniel, I've been looking in your eyes every day. I come here every single day. Your eyes are getting oranger and oranger. I said, you are overdosing, aren't you? He thought no one noticed. I mean, Daniel was a really amazing person. he was in the goth thing. He wore a black kind of M&M, pull-down cap. He had black everywhere, black around his eyes. He had black clothing, every single part of his clothing. He wore chains. I can't believe Starbucks let him. He wore big link chains as a belt, and it hung down like this, like with his wallet hanging off of it. He even had metal studs in the sides of his pants, and he wore great big black boots that had metal on them too. I mean, he was into this goth thing, totally. I later found out, because we became friends, he was what they called back then heavy black metal? I don't know, heavy metal something, rock band. So here I am with my track. I said, Daniel, your eyes are turning orange. I said, that means you're dying. And I said, this track is a warning to you that you're going to wake up when you die in hell. Now, I don't usually share the gospel that way. I did that in 30 seconds, sliding. While I was talking to him, as he was sliding to me, I was talking, and I was sliding to him the track. He just picked that thing up, opened it up, and just flashed those big orange eyes at me, and just like, he didn't say anything. He just went, like, what did you just say? I mean, I don't know what he was thinking. And I went and sat and edited my dissertation and went on. Came back the next day, because I was looking for him. I wanted to follow up. Waited in line, ordered. He didn't slide my drink. There was a different person. Next day. So the third day, I said to the cashier, where's Daniel? And she said to me, we're all asking that. Where's Daniel? She said, 2 days ago, he walked out the door right in the middle of his shift. She said, it was like in the afternoon, and she said, all of a sudden, he walked out the door, and he's never come back. We don't know what happened to him. I thought, oh no, he died. I went and looked in the dumpster. I thought maybe he had collapsed into the dumpster behind the Starbucks. Never again did he come back to Starbucks. I kept doing the same thing for 6 months. I was sitting at my little table, the same one I went to every day, editing my dissertation. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw black moving toward me. A lot of people wear black. But then I heard the sound of the chains. And I looked like that, and I looked up. There's Daniel. And he's coming straight to my table. And he comes like this, and he leans over to my table, and he says, hey, man, you scared the hell out of me. I thought, oh, what do you mean? He said, you gave me, and in his way he talked, he said, you gave me that gospel tract, but you didn't explain it to me. And he said, I stood in the back and I read it, and I realized I am overdosing. I am going to wake up in hell, and you didn't tell me how not to go to hell. And so he said, I walked out the back door, and he said, I walked and asked every person I saw in our city of 1 million until someone understood that track. And they were from the local church called Guts. It's a weightlifting church. And everybody looked like Daniel in that church, And in fact, their worship music was heavy metal, something. And he said, and they led me to Christ. But he said, I told them, he said, about the man that told me I was going to hell and gave me the track and didn't explain it to me. And he says, now, and by the way, he came here to Florida, and he became in a group. He's that good. And he is with that group. And he says, when they have that middle part of the concert where they stop and something happens before they continue, it's a Christian heavy metal group. He said he comes out to the spotlight, and he says, let me tell you about the time someone scared the hell out of me, because he needs to scare the hell out of you. And he shares the gospel. Let me tell you this. We are supposed to be looking for opportunities. I mean, I wasn't doing very well that I made a deal with the Lord and asked for no line, but whatever it takes, we should be looking for opportunities to share Christ's greatest miracle to our generation and watch him change.